Good morning, Brother Chad Long from Delhi Baptist Church here with you, and hope you're having a good morning so far. We are in Hebrews chapter 2, and this is one of my favorite chapters of the book. The late, great Dr. Curtis Hudson, who I have made it a point to tell you is my favorite all-time preacher. I like a lot of old preachers, but Curtis Hudson's my favorite because he's the most humble and one of the hardest hitting. He knows how to preach the word, preach it straight, preach it hard, and be humble about it. And I've always admired that. I hope that I can copy a whole lot of what I've learned from him. But Dr. Curtis Hudson had a son named Tony Hudson who is still preaching. I like Tony Hudson, but he's not my favorite by any stretch. He's good, but you have to take Tony with a grain of salt. But I said all that to say this. We are in Hebrews 2, and I heard Dr. Tony Hudson, Dr. Curtis's son, preach a message on this first verse of chapter 2 one time. It was called Don't Let It Slip. And, he takes a unique approach to that. You can look it up. It's on YouTube. Tony's still preaching in Middle Tennessee Baptist Church, so you can find him. But you may not like his style, and it's okay. He's different. But the message he preaches on this was really good, and I never forgot it. And that's one of the reasons why I love this chapter of Hebrews chapter 2. I'll read it to you. It says, therefore, and anytime you see therefore, you want to back up and see what it's there for. Therefore is referencing how Jesus is glorified in chapter 1. We talked about how he's so much higher than the angels and how he is God himself, and he's way up here. He's elevated in chapter 1. In chapter 2, he's made lower than the angels. There's a reason for this. We'll talk about it in a minute. But in chapter 2, verse 1, he says, therefore, since he is so high and wonderful and great, we ought to give them more earnest heed. That means we ought to listen more carefully to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we should let them slip. So basically he's saying, because of all these things that we know about Jesus and that we've heard about Jesus, we should strive really hard not to drift away, not to let these things slip. I have two different commentaries that I found reference about what I'm fixing to tell you, and so I want to share with you both of them. In my King James Study Bible that I like, that has multiple authors, it says that this is the first of 5 warnings in Hebrews. Dr. J. Vernon McGee says this is the first of 6 warnings in Hebrews. Now, they both cover the same passages. They just break them up a little differently. I like my study Bible more often than I agree with Dr. McGee, but in this particular setting, I like Dr. McGee because when he breaks this down into 6 warnings, he names them. And I'll give you the names in the verses real quickly. Peril of drifting is found here in Hebrews 2, 1 through 4. And there is a peril to drifting, and we'll see that as we study this passage. But let me go ahead and give you the others. If you want to jot these down and study them later or as we go through the book. Or if not, I'll try to remember to mention them when we get there. But peril of doubting, Hebrews 3, 7 through 4, 2. The study Bible I've got breaks this down a little differently. It's 3, 7 through 9, and then later chapter 4 through I forget. It doesn't matter. Because these are broken up differently in each book, I'm not going to try to give you all of it. I'm just going to tell you what Dr. McGee has here because he gives you a title to it. Anyway, peril of doubting, 3, 7 through 4, 2. Peril of dull hearing, not being able to hear. That is a peril, by the way, and you'll find that in chapter 5, 11 through 14. Peril of departing. These all start with a D. Chapter 6, 1 through 20. Again, that one's broken up a little differently in my other book, but that's okay. Peril of despising. Chapter 10, 26 through 39, and then peril of denying. Chapter 12, 15 through 29. We'll go through these. We'll look at these when we get there, and I'll give you some differences between what my one commentary versus what my McGee commentary shares with us, but it's going to be very similar because these are covering the same subjects. They just recognize them a little differently. So anyway, these are perils given to us, things that we need to worry about, and the first one is here, and that's why I brought it up. Chapter 2, verse 1 gives us a warning. We ought to give the more earnest heed to these things which we have heard, lest at any times we should let them slip. For if the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward. Now, this is making a point, and this is the middle of the point. But let me make clear what you just heard. The word spoken by angels is a reference to the active role angels took in giving out the law. According to Deuteronomy chapters 32 and 33, I think, angels had an active role in what the Lord did when he gave the law to Moses. Do remember that while God was there and his presence was manifested in a couple of different ways, he's never met anyone face to face, and the angels did take an active role. Most of what was going on back then, the angels were a part of. All of the plagues. Remember, the death angel is the one who brought about the final plague, and I think a host of angels participated in everything from the frogs to the lice to the blood and the water. I mean, God did it, but he used the angels to help give out the law. And so what he's saying is, if what were given by angels, the messengers of God, was steadfast and it was trustworthy and it was powerful and good, and every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward. In other words, and every time you disobeyed the law, you were punished for it. If you disregarded the law, you didn't get away with that. Okay, God's law was powerful and holy, and you didn't just ignore it. And if you did, you paid a penalty. It was a price for ignoring or disobeying God's law. If that's the case, and this is the scenario he's giving us here, in verse 3, how shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation? In other words, if we put our salvation by grace through faith so much higher than trying to follow the law, and we do, because you can't get saved by the law, because you can't keep it. Nothing wrong with the law, but you can't keep it. If we know that the law was so holy that you shouldn't disregard it, and we hold salvation in a higher regard, then what do you think is going to happen if we disregard that salvation? If we disregard that message of salvation? And that's the warning here. So we need to give the more earnest heed. We need to be more careful. We need to not let it slip, not drift away, not ignore the power of his saving grace. And not just where it's applied to us, but where it's applied to others, and we're required to share it. If we neglect in that, then we're contributing to the problem. We're to share it. Anyhow, he says, how shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation? Neglecting it in ourselves and in others, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord and was confirmed unto us by them that heard him. I'll say this quickly and move on. I still think this is Paul talking. But for those who believe it was Barnabas, this is where they get their evidence. Not only are there a few areas where the writing's a bit different, a bit more, just a different style, but here where this is written, he makes the point to say, confirmed unto us by them that heard him, which is a reference to the apostles who heard it directly from Christ. And Paul, who's considered an apostle, who did hear directly from Christ by special revelation. The argument is that if he's talking about those who heard Christ directly and leaving himself out of that, then he must not be the author. I get the argument. I do. And I'm not going to argue. I mean, if you think Barnabas wrote this letter, more power to you. There's some others that have been considered, but it definitely, in my mind, had to be one of those two. I still think it was Paul. I think what he meant was those who walked with him, those who were specifically with him, not just who met him after he resurrected. Now, Paul did talk directly to the Lord. I think the Lord, and Galatians tells us that, but the Lord had him out by himself where he could teach him directly, but after the resurrection. I just think this is Paul basically saying that those who walked with him and spent the 3.5 years with him in his ministry have told us this. And so knowing that, we need to take that seriously and remember the importance of it and not drift away. Anyway, I just want to show you where they get that from. It depends on how you interpret what he's saying, but basically he did say these things. This salvation, this great salvation, was first spoken by the Lord himself and then confirmed unto us by those that walked with him. Doesn't necessarily mean that Paul didn't write this. That's just what some people get out of it. Verse 4, God also bearing them witness with signs, wonders, diverse miracles, and gifts of the Holy Ghost according to his own will. He's saying, look, God confirmed all of this. So how can we ignore it? How can we not take it seriously? How can we not share it? How can we not take an active role in this? So these first 4 verses we're going to close this morning, but just be aware that he's moving into a section here where he's going to talk about how Jesus, who is above the angels, for a time was put below them in the form of a man, and still all of these things were confirmed in him, by him, and through him, and after the fact by the miracles that were done and the ways that God used the people in this movement that was the beginning of the church. So anyway, the main message for this morning is don't let it slip. I don't care what's going on in the rest of the country. I don't care what's going on in the rest of the world. I don't care if they let homosexuals take over every aspect of this administration. We still can't let slip the importance of the salvation of Jesus Christ that was given to us through his word and through all the things we know about Jesus himself. We've still got to hold this in high regard as the most important thing we will ever do or talk about. The salvation that we have through Jesus is the most important thing that has ever happened or will ever happen. And we have that because of the sacrifice made by Christ himself. And so we need to not let that slip. We need to not drift away. We need to not forget the importance of these things. And we need to share them with everybody who will listen, with everybody that we can. And that's why we do this. That's why every morning it's important to me to take these few moments and share the Bible with people. It's important to me to continue to try to share verbally with all I come in contact with. It's important for me to preach. It's important for me to teach. It's important for me to sing praises to him and let people see me doing those things. It's important to lead my family. It's important for them to see how important Jesus is to me. And so we all have a duty. We all have a responsibility. And it's important. God will, if he'll punish those who disregarded the law, he'll certainly punish those who disregard this great salvation that we have. Don't let yourself be punished because you did not share this salvation that was offered to us. And I don't say that to scare you, but if we belong to Christ, we do get our butts whipped from sometimes. And I don't want to get whipped for not sharing the beautiful message of the gospel. There's no hope in anything else. So anyway, I hope that helps you. I hope you'll think about these things, study these things. And don't think I'm getting on to you. I'm not. I just want you to see the warning that the Lord's given us and how important it is that we do these things and remember these things and share these things. Not just so that we don't get punished, but so that others might get saved. And I got to see somebody saved recently, so I'm so ready to do that again. And if you've never led anybody to Jesus, then you need to try doing that. You don't know how wonderful that experience can be for you and how God will reward you for doing it. You guys have a wonderful day and do consider these things. We'll see you, Lord willing, tomorrow.